In January 2026, a federal courtroom in Manhattan became the stage for one of the most serious and closely watched criminal trials in recent U.S. history, the trial of Tal, Orrin, and Alone Alexander. Once known in elite social circles as successful luxury real estate brokers and affluent partygoers, the three brothers now stand accused of a decades-long pattern of sex trafficking and abuse that prosecutors say stretched from 2008 to 2021. Federal authorities allege that the brothers used their wealth, influence, and social connections to lure women and underage girls into dangerous situations. According to opening statements by prosecutors, the brothers would meet potential victims at nightclubs, bars, and through dating apps. They then offered promises of luxury experiences, exclusive parties, flights to the Hamptons or Las Vegas, and trips on private yachts or cruises to entice them into private settings. Once there, prosecutors allege the victims were drugged, assaulted, and raped. At the start of the trial on January 27th, Assistant U.S. Attorney Madison Smicer told the jury that the brothers masqueraded as party boys when really they were predators. She said they had a playbook for recruiting and harming women, using drugs, alcohol, and coercion to overpower their victims. What makes this case especially shocking is the scale and reach of the allegations. Federal prosecutors say more than 40 women have come forward with accusations against at least one of the brothers, and more testimonies are expected as the trial unfolds. Some of the alleged assaults reportedly occurred when victims were extremely intoxicated and unable to give consent, and in at least one instance prosecutors expect to present evidence involving a minor. But from the very beginning, the defense has painted an entirely different picture. The brothers have pleaded not guilty to all charges, and their attorneys argue that the encounters were consensual and that the allegations are being mischaracterized by prosecutors. Some defense lawyers have even suggested that former consensual relationships are now being reframed in court for dramatic effect. As this trial progresses, it raises urgent questions about privilege, power, and accountability, and how far the justice system can go in unpacking decades of alleged misconduct by men once celebrated in society. For years, the allegations against the Alexander brothers existed only as isolated stories, whispered warnings shared privately among friends, messages sent too late at night, and uneasy memories that many women chose not to report. Prosecutors would later argue that this silence was not accidental, but the result of fear, confusion, and power imbalance. According to court filings, many of the women who would eventually come forward described strikingly similar experiences. They met one of the brothers in social settings that appeared glamorous and safe, upscale bars, private parties, or through dating apps where the brothers presented themselves as wealthy professionals. What followed, prosecutors allege, was a familiar sequence: heavy drinking, pressure to continue the night in a private location, and a rapid loss of control over the situation. Several women told investigators they felt disoriented or incapacitated, unable to recall large portions of the night. Others said they woke up realizing they had been assaulted but could not fully explain how it happened. In the days and weeks that followed, many blamed themselves, a response psychologists say is common in cases involving alcohol, drugs, and coercion. What changed everything was not a single report, but a pattern. Federal investigators say that when one woman finally spoke in detail, her account closely matched others that had been quietly documented years apart. Locations differed, but the methods were similar. The same types of invitations, the same pressure, the same aftermath of shame and confusion. As more women came forward, investigators began to see what they described in court as a repeatable system of abuse, rather than individual misunderstandings. The case escalated when federal authorities became involved, allowing investigators to examine travel records, phone data, and witness statements across state lines. Prosecutors argue this broader view revealed coordination between the brothers, shared locations, overlapping timelines, and consistent behavior that suggested planning rather than coincidence. Defense attorneys strongly dispute this interpretation. They argue that prosecutors are retroactively connecting unrelated encounters to build a narrative that does not reflect reality. According to the defense, the brothers lived fast-paced social lives and engaged in consensual relationships that are now being misinterpreted under the pressure of a high-profile investigation. But to prosecutors, the volume of testimony matters. They argue that when dozens of unrelated women describe similar experiences over many years, the explanation becomes harder to dismiss. By the time arrests were made, the case had shifted from isolated allegations to a federal examination of privilege, consent, and accountability, and whether wealth and social status can shield people from scrutiny for years. As the trial continues, the jury is now faced with a difficult task, deciding whether this was a series of misunderstandings or something far more deliberate. As the trial moved deeper into testimony, the focus shifted from allegations to evidence, and the quiet, methodical way prosecutors began laying out their case. This was no dramatic television spectacle. Instead, the courtroom atmosphere was controlled, deliberate, and heavy with consequence. Federal prosecutors called their first witnesses to establish context rather than emotion. Travel records, text messages, and location data were introduced to show how often the brothers' movements overlapped with the accounts described by accusers. Flights to the same cities, hotel bookings on the same dates, messages sent within minutes of one another. Individually, each detail appeared ordinary. Together, prosecutors argued they formed a pattern. Several witnesses testified about communication they had with the brothers before and after alleged assaults. Jurors heard about invitations that began casually and escalated quickly, and about follow-up messages that some women said felt confusing or unsettling in hindsight. In some cases, prosecutors pointed to gaps in memory reported by multiple witnesses, moments where the night seemed to disappear entirely. Expert testimony played a key role. Specialists in trauma and substance-facilitated assault explained how alcohol and certain drugs can impair memory while leaving individuals conscious and responsive. A detail prosecutors say is critical to understanding why many women did not immediately report what happened. According to these experts, delayed reporting is common in cases involving coercion rather than overt violence. The defense responded by challenging credibility and interpretation. Attorneys emphasized inconsistencies in timelines and questioned why no police reports were filed at the time of the alleged incidents. They argued that regret, embarrassment, or shifting social attitudes were being confused with criminal behavior. In cross-examination, defense lawyers repeatedly returned to one central claim: consent. Throughout the proceedings, the brothers sat largely expressionless, occasionally leaning toward their attorneys as evidence was presented. Observers in the courtroom noted the contrast between the restrained legal process and the severity of the accusations being discussed. What stood out most was the tone of the trial itself. This was not about spectacle or shock value. It was about whether years of similar stories, supported by records and expert analysis, could meet the high burden required in federal court. By the end of the week, jurors had been presented with two sharply different narratives. One described a coordinated abuse of power hidden behind wealth and access. The other portrayed a group of men being unfairly judged for consensual behavior viewed through a modern lens. The verdict, still weeks away, would depend on which story the jury found more credible, and whether the evidence bridged the gap between allegation and proof. As the Alexander brothers' trial moves toward its final stages, the question before the jury extends beyond guilt or innocence. It asks something broader about how power operates, how long silence can last, and what it takes for allegations to finally be taken seriously. For the women who testified, the courtroom became more than a place of judgment. It became the first public acknowledgement of experiences they say shaped their lives for years. Prosecutors argued that many of the alleged victims did not come forward sooner because they believed no one would listen, that the social status, wealth, and confidence of the men involved made accountability feel impossible. Whether the jury agrees or not, that fear is central to the case. The defense, meanwhile, has warned against drawing conclusions based on patterns alone. Their argument rests on a fundamental principle of the justice system: that accusations, no matter how numerous, must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. They insist the trial reflects a dangerous shift, one where social perception risks replacing evidence. That tension sits at the heart of this case. If convictions are secured, legal experts say the trial could reinforce the federal government's ability to prosecute long-term abuse cases that rely heavily on survivor testimony supported by circumstantial evidence. It could encourage other victims in unrelated cases to step forward even years later. If the brothers are acquitted, the case may still leave a lasting imprint, highlighting the difficulty of prosecuting crimes where memory, consent, and delayed reporting intersect. Outside the courtroom, the case has already changed conversations. It has reignited debates about nightlife culture, alcohol, consent, and the quiet ways coercion can occur without visible violence. It has also raised uncomfortable questions about how often accusations are dismissed when the accused appear successful, charismatic, or well-connected. Ultimately, the Alexander brothers' trial is not just about three men. It is about whether the justice system can effectively confront allegations that unfold slowly, privately, and far from public view, and whether truth can still surface after years of silence. Whatever the verdict, the case serves as a reminder that some crimes are not defined by a single moment, but by patterns that only become clear when people are finally heard. And for many watching, that may be the most unsettling part of all. Long after the courtroom empties and headlines move on, cases like this tend to leave quieter consequences behind. Regardless of the outcome, the Alexander brothers' trial has already altered how similar allegations are viewed by investigators, by prosecutors, and by the public. Federal authorities have acknowledged that cases involving delayed reporting and social coercion are among the most difficult to prosecute. They often rely on fragmented memories, circumstantial records, and survivor testimony that unfolds years after the alleged events. Yet prosecutors argue that difficulty does not equal impossibility, and that patterns, when supported by evidence, can still reveal the truth. Legal analysts following the trial say its real legacy may lie in how future cases are built. Investigators are increasingly turning to digital footprints, travel data, messaging histories, location records, to corroborate accounts that once would have been dismissed as unverifiable. In that sense, the case reflects a broader shift in modern criminal investigations, where technology quietly fills the gaps left by time and silence. For survivors watching from afar, the trial represents something else entirely. Even without knowing the verdict, many say the public airing of testimony sends a message that their experiences are not automatically invalid because they took years to articulate. That acknowledgement alone, advocates argue, can change whether others feel safe enough to come forward. At the same time, the case has fueled serious debate about fairness and due process. Defense attorneys and civil liberties groups warn that courts must remain vigilant against assumptions based on reputation, lifestyle, or public opinion. They argue that justice depends not on narratives, but on proof, and that every defendant is entitled to that standard, no matter how disturbing the allegations may be. This unresolved tension is what makes the case so significant. It sits at the intersection of accountability and restraint, belief and evidence, empathy and law. It forces uncomfortable questions about how society defines consent, power, and responsibility in environments where boundaries are often blurred. As the jury deliberates and the legal process continues, one thing is clear: this case will not simply disappear with a verdict. It will be cited, analyzed, and debated for years, in courtrooms, classrooms, and public conversations about how justice adapts to crimes that rarely leave clear edges. And perhaps that is the final truth of this story, that some cases matter not because they provide easy answers, but because they challenge how justice is understood in the first place.